I can't fix everything. So what do I need to do to protect myself and my business? Because I can't spend if I spend more than I make on cyber, then what's the point? I might as well just shut the business down because I'm losing money and I'm not profitable, right? So there's got to be this catch-22. And that's the thing that a lot of times cyber people don't get. Oh, you've got to fix this. It doesn't matter what it costs. But it does, because if it costs more than I make, then it doesn't matter. I'll just shut the business down because I can't spend more than I have.
You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
All right. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of the Protect It All podcast. Today, I have Lee. Lee, why don't you tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, and where you come from?
I'm Lee Walker. So you can probably tell I'm from the other side of the coin. Spent 20 years in the UK civil service. A lot of my time in national security, but a lot of my time deal with governance, risk management. Unfortunately, I lost my job, but I then went to alone and combined sort of the two things I know best, security and GRC. My main focus is on small, medium-sized enterprises in the supply chain, logistics firms, think warehouses, transportation and bits and pieces. It is with them. It's a sort of area of OT no one really thinks about, but there's a lot there that can obviously go on. And transportation, logistics, it's all those little nodes that connect everything else. All logistics companies, they can be a very attractive target.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
Trying to help protect them.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the logistics of, as we're moving products around the world and, we're really tied to everything that the drink that we have and the coffee and the clothes and like everything has to be moved from one place to another. It could be local logistics. It could be big, worldwide logistics, big companies, FedEx and UPS, but those aren't the only players and the only people in those games. How did you get into and kind of dive in a little bit around the GRC side of things? Because many people have heard it. Many people may know it a little bit. Like, what are you doing in those spaces and how are you helping these organizations specifically to enhance or enable themselves to not be attacked and protect themselves?
Well, in a nutshell, GRC is governance, risk management, compliance. Governance is just making sure an organisation works the best way it can. Risk management is basically looking after risk, making sure it's managed. Obviously, you can't eliminate all risks, but you can manage them. And compliance is, internal and external. Internal policies, compliance with what you're contracted to do or with local government, national government, or wider legal structures like that. Also looking at regulatory bodies and things like that, because certainly in the UK and also in Europe in the last decade or so, regulators have been given teeth and they are not afraid to bite.
Yeah.
But the thing is just trying to help people understand regulators aren't meant to be scary unless they need to be. They're there to help, but you also need to help. So a lot of other things I do is I'm very keen on education. So board awareness. Boards care about security. They understand that security is an issue. They just need help to bridge that gap, whether it be in a corporate setting or an engineering setting or whatever. So I do some presentations with boards about just an overview. Here's the things that you really need to know, and also help other people learn how to translate that technical risk.
Well, that's huge, right? Because a lot of times we do this for a living, right? So we eat, sleep, breathe cybersecurity and technology and the risks and compliances and all that kind of stuff. the boards and leadership, you've got CFOs, you've got people with different backgrounds that understand the business, but they don't necessarily understand the cyber risks that are in these businesses. And it's easy to see, especially I've been a vendor. I'm not saying that I did this, but a lot of vendors are selling fear, right? That fear selling of, fear and uncertainty. The sky is falling, right? The end of the world. You've got to do this now, or your company's going to go under. Anyways, my point is, there's all of these voices and messages screaming from the rooftops about how bad cyber is and what all the things that you need to do. It can be really overwhelming as a business leader, especially one that didn't come from cyber and doesn't necessarily understand the risk. Or even if you did, if you're at that level and you're not working it every day, there's so many things that are thrown at us that we have to be able to translate the real from the, okay, what do I do with this, right? I can't fix everything. So what do I need to do to protect myself and my business? Because I can't spend if I spend more than I make on cyber, then what's the point? I might as well just shut the business down because I'm losing money and I'm not profitable, right? So there's got to be this catch-22. And that's the thing that a lot of times cyber people don't get. Oh, you've got to fix this. It doesn't matter what it costs. But it does, because if it costs more than I make, then it doesn't matter. I'll just shut the business down because I can't spend more than I have.
The other thing I forgot to say is I've recently gone through a personal rebrand. I'm trying to remember not to talk about cybersecurity anymore, but talk about resilience instead.
Yep. Explain that. What's the difference? Why do you say that?
Well, certainly in the UK and the EU, I've noticed the burden of legislation, how regulators talk. It is all about resilience now. So taking the financial sector in Europe, we've got DORA, Digital Operational Resilience Act. It's not Security Act. It's about resilience, and it's a bigger thing. And if we're hit, it may be a cyber incident. You may have some off-site server that's just been flooded because it's put near a river and that river's prone to flooding every winter. It doesn't matter. But if there's an incident, if you look at a CIA, if the A isn't there, doesn't matter how, but if the A is not there. Correct. So this is why I'm now thinking more about resilience than just security, because I think security is a great foundation, but resilience should be the end goal.
Yeah, ultimately risk, cyber is just one of the things that is a risk to a business, right? It's just one.
Yeah.
But to your point, like if I run out of fuel, if whatever the thing is that stops me from being able to provide the service, if I'm thinking about electricity or transportation or your train system, like only one of those things is a cyber risk. The availability of the train to get from point A to point B, there's a lot more risks and things that cause availability issues of your train not getting there than just a cyber attacker or a nation state attacker, right? That is one of the vectors, but it's one of millions of other ones that have nothing to do with cybersecurity whatsoever.
No, but it is. And this is the point. I can help you that the cyber angle of that to, again, just bring that voice to them, just make sure they consider that, as well as all the other multiple considerations they have to do. Because what you want to place the organisation in the best possible case. You can't eliminate risk. That's just stupid. I think the other trick is getting boards to consciously acknowledge the risk. Not just read it in a briefing and don't really understand, but actually acknowledge what this risk means.
So how are you able to? Because that's a very hard thing to say. Like we can talk about that, but just because I present a risk or I explain it, understanding that risk. Let's say it's a technology risk, or let's say it is a cyber risk, right? How do I translate that to what that means to my business and what the potential impact? Because a lot of times I see organizations, they accept the risk. Oh, we're good with that. I'll just accept that risk. but they don't really understand what that means until it's too late. And they're not really translating and understanding, okay, if this goes down, then this train doesn't get to the station, right? Then people are stranded, then lives are lost, then they're like, oh, wait, that I didn't understand that. This could make that happen.
Yeah, exactly. And that you have to talk about cyber from a business point of view. So financial, reputational, legal, these are all the risks that businesses face on a day-to-day basis. Cyber fits into all of them. You just need to adapt language so that they fully appreciate the message, because once they do, then they can be more useful. Even if the answer is no, we don't know how to accept that risk. Yeah, GRC, I'm now thinking paperwork. Great, the board met and it's minuted that due to whatever reason, they have consciously accepted that risk. You may not like it, but at least it's then documented as. And it's just getting to that, are you sure you're aware of the decision you're making? Without trying to practice, you've just got too much work for the amount of hours that they're on the day.
You're never at a place where you've removed all risk. That's not even the point. Nobody's goal is to completely be risk-free. It's impossible. I can never be secure. I can never be zero risk. It's about accepting and choosing which risks are important. And to your point, the real struggle is understanding what the real risk is, not the vulnerability, not the CI, the score or whatever that comes out, but it's really, what does that mean translated to what is the impact to my business process? And really the key to that is more about understanding my business process than it is understanding the cyber risk or anything that's coming with it. Because unless you can understand that the real, how your business works, then you don't really understand how this one cog that's in this process impacts this overall process. Because if it doesn't, one of the analogies I always give is, I've got two computers, right? Or PLCs or whatever. I've got one that controls the ice machine in the break room, and the other one controls, the train system or the turbine or something really important. They have the same vulnerabilities. They have the same risk to an attacker taking them over, but it's not the same impact to my business. The ice machine going down, I've got some employees that have to have lukewarm water. If the turbine goes down or the train goes down, that's a huge impact to my business. So it's not the same thing, even though from a risk score in cyber, a lot of times we look at those two assets and the tools and they have the same score level, because red flashing, you've got to fix this. It's Windows XP or whatever. Like, okay, if it goes down, I don't care. It doesn't impact it doesn't make me even, have an emergency meeting about it, much less lose money.
Well, I mean, that's the main difference between IT and OT. IT, you've got to touch it. OT is, okay, what's the patch? What does it impact? If I think it's important, I'll bring it up in the next engineering meeting. And again, governance is about simple things. Okay, I've got a document that says items that need to be patched at next available moment. Just so that it's there, we remember, we can, look at it, because things may not be patched for a week, month, a year, 10 years, or ever. Okay, here's a document of things engineers think need to be patched. We've now got it in a queue for when the next available time is. The thing as well, important document in it, so you don't think, we spoke about that 5 years ago, next available downtime, which is next week. Now, what was it again?
Think about that, the documentation side, it's so important because people change, the roles change. To your point, why did we accept that? What was our justification behind that? Who made that decision? And beyond just the who, not pointing fingers, more around how did we come to that decision? How did we get here? Obviously, there were reasons, there were justifications. To your point, I want to continue to harp on this because it's super important, especially every time I go to a conference, I have these conversations. And it's like, well, you got to fix that. Well, yeah, you don't actually. Like, you don't have to fix everything. You can never fix everything. So you're having to choose, am I going to fix this? Am I going to accept this risk? Am I going to mitigate it in another way? And mitigating it in another way may be cyber insurance. It may be changing my process. It may be a number of things that have nothing to do with cybersecurity. And that blows cyber people's minds.
What an idea if there's a patch. Is like, I'm going to have lunch in 20 minutes, I'll do it then. I'll just restart my laptop, then go and grab a bit of lunch. It's a good excuse to get out 5 minutes.
Right.
And it's all about understanding what is the purpose of that patch. What does it impact? And also what's the impact if we don't patch it? Not just if you do, but if we don't. And there's all these considerations that, you need to take into consideration of. But coming back to my previous point, it's about governance and getting senior management research to understand this is a process. And sometimes we need the board to say, okay, what risks are you happy with? We've got this urgent patch. It may take operations down half a day, but we're busy warehouse. Christmas is in 3 months' time. We're getting nuts orders in. What do you want to do?
Yeah. And what is the impact if you do it? What is the impact if you don't do it? Like, what are those things that you can, and real, because again, cyber people will scream the sky's falling. Like, the warehouse is going to burn to the ground and we're going to kill people and like all of the worst things in the world. And sometimes those aren't necessarily true. Sometimes they're exaggerated. So it's difficult to really be able to understand what the real risk is if you don't do it and what the real risk is if you do it. And that's the other thing that some people don't understand. Sometimes the risk to patching, especially in OT, but not just in OT, sometimes that risk is bigger than not doing it because it can actually break the system. Like, I'm old enough to remember when you could patch a Windows system and you were rolling the dice hoping it didn't get the blue screen of death after you rolled out new Microsoft security patches. Like, it was really, you didn't know. Like, so you didn't do it on the weekend. You waited until a Monday. You made sure you had a backup because rolling out Windows patches could crash your system. And that still happens in an OT world.
Yeah. And as I say, it's not something that you can say, oh, I've got a pop-up. This needs to be patched. Great excuse. Let's go home. Make myself a quick cup of tea and stretch legs. You can't do that.
So how are you helping folks to translate those cyber risks? Because again, there's so many things that are happening. There's so many risks. Again, if we just talk about cyber, if you think about that, like, how are you helping to translate folks, boards and leaders to understand the real things they need to do and let them make that decision? You're giving them advice, you're giving them suggestions, you're guiding them, but how are you helping them to have those conversations to really understand the risks of their business and choose, hey, we're okay accepting this. Hey, we need to go actually implement these things. Or I want to wait until after the Christmas season and we'll do it then and we'll just monitor it for now. Like, how are you having those conversations?
Well, you just need to go in and say, before we start this conversation, this is going to be, all cards on the table. No suggestion is stupid. We're going to put everything there and we'll figure out what the best option is. It may take a couple of hours, but we need to do it. And then you start kind of probing them. Okay, well, what if you can't do this at the moment? What then? Tie it back to the business objectives, the financial regulatory risk or whatever. Okay. And just keep tying it back to how to keep an organization solvent. That sounds extreme, but sometimes, okay, you don't say it, but it's like, well, if you don't do it, there may be a slight loss in the next quarter's revenue.
Right.
But the flip side is, what risk are you most comfortable with?
Yeah, for sure. How do you see? Go ahead.
And just let them make the decision. Here are the options. What do you want to do? And then document the decision.
Yeah, and that's the key. How much, man, it's such a it sounds so simple, not really, but how are you seeing, because it's not a technology problem, as we know. I think we've kind of harped on that up until now. Yes, one of the factors are a patch or a implementation or a new tool or whatever that is. But that is a very small fraction, even if it is a physical control that you need to install, manipulate, do a patch, reboot, install a new product, whatever that is. There's so much more to that going in or not being done that is beyond just the installation. If you think about a patch, you've got all these other things to consider, people, process, technology along the way. And that's the hard part, right? The organization, the site, they understand their system and they're telling you it doesn't need to be done or it does need to be done. And then there's 10 layers of impact above it that have nothing to do with that, but are impacted by that. And those, that people and process side of the equation are just as big a factor and so much not understood by most organizations, by most consultants, because that part of the conversation, it's easy as a cyber person, you put on, well, you've got to patch it. And then you don't really have the other conversations of the people in the process side of this and all the way up the chain and all of the impacts that it has or could have if it's done or not done.
Technology is great. It's there to make our lives easier. And it is, but you need to be aware of the entire picture. But it's like, if you take that away, what then needs to come in place to keep that operation going? Or do you make the conscious decision that we're just going to stop completely for 2 hours whilst we this thing?
Yeah. Well, and it also rolls into, as we think on the global scale of things as well, geopolitics and oil prices and all of these things start factoring into risks that have, again, nothing to do with cybersecurity, but everything to do with risk to my business and resilience of, hey, we have to get this product from overseas. Well, now I can't get it, or it's more expensive now. And all of these kind of things factor into the overall understanding of the business. And that's what we have to understand. Again, I go back to most of the people that are on this pod or listen to this podcast, they're thinking about things from that cyber lens. They're not always thinking about the other factors that go into making sure this conveyor belt runs. And it's not just because the machines can run, because somebody has to make sure that we can pay the electric bill and that, we have product to come into the front so that we can make the widget and spit it out the back end. It's not just about the cyber risk.
Well, the UK's a little island. It's like all the internet is all there, out there with the magic dust and everything.
Yeah.
It's like subsea cables.
Yeah.
What happens if a fisherman accidentally drops a tool in it and disrupts the cable? I remember talking to a client from Bermuda. They're in the financial sector.
Mm-hmm.
They says,
right. Yep.
They were impacted. Why? There's a key cable went from Bermuda to, I don't know if it was in the World Trade Center, but it got damaged and it was out. Nothing to do with the actual terrorist attack whatsoever, but that cable got damaged.
Yeah.
I know it's different now because it's got cloud and everything, but there's still that physical layer somewhere. As do you know what all your redundancies are?
Right. Most of the time we don't, right?
I'm not saying here, let's brainstorm every single eventuality, but you do need to sometimes just take a step back, take a holistic approach, think, okay, these are all the things that could happen. And then also going back to insurance. Insurance is such big issue. What does your policy cover?
Yeah.
What does it not cover?
Right.
What does your direct liability insurance cover? Are you personally responsible for hundreds of thousands of pounds lost due to something in the supply chain that you had no control over, but is having an impact on your operations? Boards love talking about that. They get pretty scared when I talk about insurance policy cover.
Yeah. So when you're having these conversations with these boards, obviously in the UK, there's quite a bit of regulations coming out, and I've come from Power Utility and NERC SIP, and obviously there's NIS2 over there. How are you seeing the impact positively and negatively, for instance, I guess, where people are using that? And because it's very easy to be, I can argue both sides. Like, I hate the government stepping in and telling you how to do things, and how's that going to help me run my business? On the flip side, if I don't have these standards and regulations and requirements, then some people choose to not do anything, and then that's a risk to the greater economy and the greater good of all the types of things. So how are you seeing it help folks to understand and actually implement and do the right things? And are people doing it, or are they just trying to check a box for compliance and kind of, I'm sure there's probably both, but how are you seeing success with it?
Yeah, I mean, technically, there's no. It's easy if an organisation say, "Hey, we want to fully comply with, I don't know, let's say in the corporate law 27001. We want to actively do this." Wait, because that means our senior management are actively thinking about security. Right? I like industrial companies that they can be in France in 2 hours. It's like, and if you want, the way the EU operates is if it wants to trade there, you need to comply with their regulations. Do
Mm-hmm.
you know do you know how this to impact on your organisation? Yes, because rightly or wrongly, they're saying, well, if you supply to Europe, you're supplying European customers, therefore you fall under our regulations. Do you know what you have to do to comply with those regulations? A lot of people say, no, we know we have to, but we're a bit vague on the actual detail. That's half a win because at least they know they've got that awareness that something needs to happen, which is far easier than people saying, do we? We're not in the EU anymore. We don't need it.
Right.
And again, I mean, AI is the other interesting thing. Philosophically, in the UK is, geographically, we're in between America and Europe. Philosophically, we're sort of between Europe and the US as well. And it makes a lot of work for people on GRC. It probably doesn't help that government says it's trying to understand that this is what we have to work with. How can we make it as simple as possible for you?
Yeah.
I love to, if we can do it a simple way, let's do it a simple way.
Yeah.
We need
I
to
mean,
make sure that what we do, we operate within the law of the territories we work in.
sure. Yeah. I mean, the goal is it shouldn't be complexity, right? It should be
Yeah,
making it as simple
absolutely.
as possible to follow, to understand, to have conversations around. If you're using big words to try to make yourself feel smart and make other people feel stupid, then you're having these conversations in the wrong way. The goal should be make it simpler, make it more easy to understand so that we can have these conversations so that we can really understand what the risk is to my business, what the impacts of doing this or not doing this from a compliance perspective, from a regulatory complex perspective, but also cybersecurity and resiliency and all those things as well.
But I also try and, maybe it's because I was in the civil service, but I also try and look at it from the regulator's point of view. What are they trying to achieve for this business? Okay. And, even if you don't have to comply, or that there's a bit of best practice, do you want to sort of adopt that bit? I believe GRC should be as flexible as possible. even though a lot of the times you can't be as flexible as you want to, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's go ahead.
The easier you make all these compliance conversations, again, the better the conversation you have with the boards, the better their understanding and the better their reaction to engaging in what you need.
Yeah. In my experience, people want to do the right thing. They
Yeah.
want to make the good decision. They wanted, they got in this business because they, maybe at one point they were passionate, whatever the reason is. Most of the people I interact with, if you give them the solution or the understanding of what the impact can be, they want to choose the right thing. Most of the people I interact with are not horrible individuals that are out there making bad decisions because they want to do wrong, right? It's just they don't normally get to that place and they're not going to be successful in the long run, right? So, and I'm obviously, this is small businesses, this is medium business, this is big business.
Yeah.
So if you can make it translated in a way that they understand, most people are going to choose and try to do the right thing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the way that you suggest. It just means in their mind, they're going to make the decision they think is best for them, their organization, and the future of their organization, right? So we have to know when they make those decisions, they're not just saying, I don't agree with you, or I don't like you, or your idea is dumb. They're saying they're taking that information. So if they didn't choose your path, you probably didn't describe it well. Like you didn't explain it to them, or there's something that they're factoring in that you're not understanding.
But again, try and speak as clearly as possible so that at least you eliminate the ambiguity on your part, even if you don't see the big picture which everyone else is seeing. And again, make note of it was discussed and decided that ... signed, dated, keep it on file. So at least it's there and it's there for reference. And maybe someone changes in 6 months' time and thought, oh, what do we discuss about them? We may be in a position to do it now. Who knows?
And I think that's the important factor. I know I continue to harp on it, but I've had so many conversations. Again, I was just in DEFCON in Singapore, and I had a gentleman walk up to me, and I'm working in the ICS Village, which is industrial control systems, and we're talking OT and plants and things like that. And it's all for education. It's just around, discussing and training. There's a lot of students there, having a lot of really fun. I've got this OT wall behind me that we take with us, and it's just a demonstration, right? It's just to showcase, what does OT look like and how do I protect it and what is it? Because it's different, right? And not everybody sees it. And this gentleman walked up to me and he's like, yeah, he was like, I worked in this industry for 20 years and like, there's no security in the protocols. And I'm like, yeah, we don't really have secure protocols. They're wide open. And he was like offended. He was like, what do you mean? It's still that way? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, why? Like, you're telling me that people choose to have insecure environments? I'm like, you got to understand, having a secure protocol does not necessarily make my process better. And you hit on it earlier, that A in the CIA triad, that availability is more important in this OT space. And what you don't realize is in this process, if I add encryption and all these other layers, that adds complexity. It can break the process. It can make it take longer. Like all those things can actually make it harder for me to do what I need to do, right? And there's other ways to secure it. So in OT, it's not that we're too stupid to understand that's how to do security. We know how to do, and there are secure protocols in OT. We just don't always use them because they're not always needed. And we're making that risk decision long along the way. And it doesn't always align with your cyber world of everything needs to be encrypted and protected and secured. And it just doesn't always make the process better. And that's hard for a lot of cyber people to wrap their heads around.
Who has access to it?
Right.
If firewall configurations, you've got separation of networks and everything, you've got competent people on your maintenance teams. And yeah, okay, you can't plan for every eventuality, but that's a very, very good start. Just on the air gaps doesn't mean it's secure. take a little USB stick dropped in a car park outside an Iranian nuclear plant. But here's the most devastating piece of OT attack was mostly down to luck. It was down to someone thinking that the human being is going to be curious enough to pick up this USB stick and see
Yep.
what's on it.
Yep.
And again, it goes back to clean it. It's like, are you sure you know what you're putting in that machine?
And it just goes to show you can have the most secure environment. You can think you have the most secure environment in the world. And that's the funny thing when we're designing these systems and we're talking to these, and it's so easy to think controls and cyber and technical controls to protect these environments. And that is great. And we should do these things, and we should have firewalls, and we should be monitoring, and we should add technical controls along the way. But I can have every product and technical capability in the world, but it doesn't stop Bob from walking the thing in the room and plugging it in, right? Like, you're not just bypass all of those security, or Bob walks over and unplugs from the firewall and plugs it directly in the internet. And now all of those technical controls are gone. And I raised my hand. I said, probably me from an OT side. I said, because I know the password to every one of these sites. I have 3 kids. And if somebody puts a gun to my head, I'm telling you, I'm going to give them the password.
Yeah.
And you can't protect and you can't remove. And we said this earlier, and we're coming back to it. There always is a theme when we go through these conversations that seems to bubble up to the top. You can't reduce all risk. You cannot get rid of it all. You cannot solve and get rid of every single risk. Because again, like we just talked about, somebody held a gun to my head. I'm going to give them the password because my life matters. My kids' lives matter. I'm human, right? Kill me, right? It's just the way it is.
But the issue there is educating end users of the common errors we see, and that can be things as basic as someone from my cousin forward to a phishing email, and the firewall isn't properly configured, and then there's a way in from IT to OT, all because no one thought, oh, let's look at this invoice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's always those little things, right?
All you can do is scan for that to happen. Okay, let's educate end users. Let's ensure IT and OT is as segmented as possible. Because we need to obviously different situations go on different levels of access and bits and pieces, but let's just try and think through some common scenarios, find where the weakness is, and that's part of, I suppose, part of governance as well. It's just you're making sure governance is all about making sure things work, and let's just take this logically one step at a time.
So, man, we talked about a lot of things. I've loved this conversation. What's one thing that you see coming up over the horizon that may be scary and that we need to change, we need to address, we need to get in front of, and maybe one thing that's exciting that you see coming up over, or whether it's regulation, it could be technical, it could be the way people are seeing it, like the sky's the limit. What comes to mind for you?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I kind of do want to say AI, but I don't want to say AI because AI is such a big, broad thing nowadays that you can get really narrow AI to look at specific and predictive maintenance, for example.
Yep.
AI can help a lot there, so that's good. But on the practical side, I think a lot of it is awareness of the field. Let's be really basic. Get young people involved in both IT and engineering. Because there's going to be a time where a lot of the people who built a lot of the foundations well, they're going to be on a golf course at one point in a cruise and not caring about work anymore because they've done their bit. And
Yep, exactly.
you need training pipelines so the knowledge isn't lost. And even if that's working in IT, how do you get people to come to OT? Because this is as important, if not more, keeping public transport systems running, powers behind everything. So I don't know if it's just a UK thing or a global thing, but it's hard to ensure that talent pipeline continues.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's a huge one, right? It's that, the aging workforce that we have, and AI is changing things, and how do you get people interested? And yeah, it's a global problem. We have that. I think I have as many conversations about how do I get into these things and how do I do these things at conferences as I do the technical side of things, which is good. That's why I do them, because that's the point, is to get people interested and show them a path. How can I do these things? And it's not easy, but it's worthwhile, and it's an enjoyable environment to be in.
I think it's getting better. I mean, you had Mike on last week. The amount of stuff he puts on about education, the amount of content he's got on YouTube, absolutely great. His knowledge is out there. It's just trying to help people understand that actually it's not just IT, there's a whole world of OT as well. It's just as important. You don't need to be an engineer to think about this.
Correct.
I'm coming from a GRC point of view. I'm not an engineer, but I try and look at things from a GRC point of view, but in an OT environment.
Yeah, 100%.
And just get more people to look at these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And think about creating a field.
Well, dude, I very much appreciate it's evening for you. So thank you for taking the time out of your day and having the conversation with me. It's a great conversation. I was in Singapore last week, so it was 13 hours ahead. That flight back was pretty insane, 16 and a half hours. And yeah, it's a different space, but it's really cool to see around the world how people are having these conversations. The risk is the same. Like we're approaching the same problems, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Asia, the US. Like these things these are international problems. We are having these issues no matter what flag you fly over your organization. It's a problem that we see because the internet brought the world, right? So we are all interconnected in so many ways.
And people just want to do that bit. Yeah, help keep the system safe.
100%. Well, awesome, man. Here's call to action. How do people get a hold of you? What do you want them to know? All the things.
I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's the best place to get hold of me. Obviously, my big passion is education and awareness. I've done sessions for boards. I'm also looking at helping people in security, how to translate risk so that you get more attention. So if anyone wants to chat, just put me down on LinkedIn and let's start a conversation.
Well, thank you again for your time today, sir. It was a great conversation. And if you're ever in the US, definitely hit me up. And the next time I'm in the UK, I'll let you know, and we can grab a coffee, a beer, whatever that may look like.
Yeah, excellent.
All right, sir. Thanks, Scott. Have a good day.
Andy.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.